Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Pocket. I am Scott, and today we have some pretty major breaking NFL news in general, but massive news for the New York Giants. John Harbaugh was fired by the Ravens after 18 seasons. He's now the new favorite to be the Giants head coach, and other coaches were fired today. Browns' Kevin Stefanski was fired, Cardinals' Jonathan Gannon, Falcons' Raheem Morris, Raiders, Pete Carroll, and then, of course, during the season, we also fired Brian Dabol, and the Titans fired Brian Callahan. But in this live stream, we will be talking mostly, if not completely, about Harbaugh in this one and the Giants. And I want to share my thoughts because he is the new favorite to be the head coach. And I have a lot to say about that. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that even though I'm a Giants fan, I'm in a fantasy league with some Ravens fans. So that's one of the fan bases I get a lot of exposure to. I'm actually in two of them. And I feel like I've learned a lot more about the Ravens and John Harbaugh since that's happened just by the osmosis. So I'm definitely going to incorporate a lot of that. And I also have a 1 hour video on Lamar Jackson and his career and if he's the Ravens' playoff problem. And I went through at least that period of time of John Harbaugh's coaching career. So I feel like I've got quite a bit to say about John Harbaugh. I'd like to get to some of the other coaches too. But this is definitely the one I wanted to lead off with. So let me start by saying I understand why he's the favorite to become the Giants head coach. And one of the main reasons is he's a really well-respected coach. I respect the hell out of him and his family. They just have a complete ecosystem of coaching trees throughout the college and the NFL world. And I love that. I love that they do that for the sport of football. And the level of greatness that they're able to achieve is it's pretty great because it gives a lot of opportunity to players, coaches, and it just makes the sport better. So it's easy to like him from that standpoint. He's just a straight football guy. Of course, everyone is, but this family genuinely is a family that bleeds football. And he coached the Ravens for 18 seasons and had an all-time record of 180 and 112. He was 13-11 in the postseason. 180 wins is 14th all-time in NFL history for any coach. He made it to 4 conference championships, winning one of them and going on to beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl, his brother. Steelers, Patriots, and Chiefs were the losses in those AFC championships. So it makes sense that John Harbaugh is the favorite to become the Giants head coach. The Giants were viewed as the team that was the most attractive. Now that does get a little messy now that the Ravens don't have a head coach. And guys like Sean McDermott could get fired as well if the Bills don't have a successful season. But it's pretty clear why. But I want to kind of change the direction of how we're looking at this because across those 18 seasons, there was a lot of greatness. You don't go 180 and 112 and, to the postseason that many times without doing some things right. And it's definitely not my fear that John Harbaugh won't be able to, generate any kind of improvement on the Giants. But this is the thing. He's 63 years old. So in theory, that could be a solid 7 seasons. I could see someone from that family going as long as a guy like Pete Carroll or Bill Belichick, like 74, 71 years old, but probably not a decade, right? But I don't want him as the head coach. And that's one of the reasons why, and because of it and everything else I'm about to go on to explain, he reminds me of a veteran bridge QB. That's what he reminds me of. Because although John Harbaugh is very athletic, I saw him squat like 600 pounds. It might have been this summer, last summer. But my point is coaches don't regress because of athleticism like quarterbacks do or, the other players. They deteriorate because of years of bad habits, eventually holding them back from keeping up with the league. And eventually it catches up to all the veteran great coaches that I'm not viewing as like this bridge type of guy. But Pete Carroll in Seattle, and then now in Vegas. Bill Belichick post Tom Brady. Mike Tomlin post Big Ben. They all haven't really been able to put it back together and get back to a Super Bowl. Except John Harbaugh is one of them that did get a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. And he has a GM that has put talent around him, despite some of the flaws on the roster. There are some. It's not great, but there's definitely been some talent on this team. Even with other great coordinators in the building over the years, Mike McDonald being one of them. Obviously, we're seeing what he's doing in Seattle. Todd Monken. Now, he was not only not able to make it back to the Super Bowl, but in the way that they lose constantly, deflating the fan base that is filled with so much hope in what they have in Lamar and, some of the talent that is on the roster. Although you could complain about some of the things like the wide receiving core, the offensive line at certain times, the defense, since McDonald has not been the same. It's still a lot that you can hope around. And there was a reason that the Ravens have had these seasons where Lamar wins MVP, and they have all this hype. It's understandable why fans get so upset when the team loses in the most ridiculous of ways. I mean, punting the ball away when you have Lamar in that offense on convertible fourth downs, like in the Bills game this season, is just one example of so many, but it was the most apparent in that one because you were punting the ball back to Josh Allen, who was red hot in the second half. What are you doing? The poor play calling in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. Despite falling, 2 touchdowns early, that Ravens defense shut them out for the rest of the game, besides a field goal. And they completely refused to run the ball. It was before Derrick Henry was there, but they were one of the most efficient, if not, they were the most efficient running team that season. And then the defensive collapses that can occur throughout the regular season for Lamar, making it harder for them to get playoff seeding, or week 18 when you're trying to fight back into the playoffs and Lamar has basically won the game for you 3 separate times. The defense collapses twice and you miss the field goal. They failed to replace some of their great coordinators like McDonald because Zach Orr is struggling every single season, at least in the beginning, and it's a struggle whether or not he's going to figure it out. Monken is good, but you got to question the play calling in the AFC Championship game and in some of the games that we've seen this season. And you got to question Harbaugh for not choosing to be also aggressive with Todd Monken. He is an asset like Lamar is, and you need to give him an opportunity to do what he's best at. And so where this leads me is that John Harbaugh has essentially maxed out his career for the most part. I mean, if he couldn't win a Super Bowl with this Ravens team and Lamar, why would he be able to do it on the Giants? John Harbaugh is a good coach and has had a Hall of Fame career. He's 14th all time in coaching wins and has the 36th highest winning percentage behind Sean McVay with those 18 years under his belt. And that's just the type of guy I want, though. Not John Harbaugh, Sean McVay. He's 39 years old. He's ahead of John Harbaugh on the all-time winning percentage, and he's only coached like 8 or 9 seasons. And for John Harbaugh, it's not impossible for him to, go on and win a Super Bowl or even just make it back to one and kind of prove me wrong on this, but his best years are probably behind him. In fact, he's been worse recently, despite all the wins that they've had. And the double-digit fourth quarter thing is real. I'm going to show you guys something. So this is the list of, I'm pulling it up right now. I have the Ravens kind of all-time record by season, and I want to go and switch over to what John Harbaugh has been struggling to do. First of all, just one score, 12 blown leads of 7 points or more in the fourth quarter since 2021. But that's not just it. This isn't just like this recent. John Harbaugh, and this is 4 months ago, broke his own record with 14 double-digit blown fourth quarter leads. That's the most since 1991. And then you want to see it in a bit of a graphical formation. How about this? You can see this goes back probably all the way to like 2008 with that Steelers game. And it just goes down the list throughout the years. A lot of these are in recent memory. I know a lot of you remember that Ravens-Dolphins game where the Dolphins came back, the playoff game, or not the playoff game. This was a regular season game, but you just remember instantly. I see Ravens-Titans, and I can't forget about those horrendous playoff games. And then obviously twice this season when you've lost Lamar to injury for a couple of weeks, and this was the games that you had him, and this is the way that your defense was performing, and you were choosing to, control the clock near the end of the game. It's just like, it's too apparent that, he's growing stale, right? Tomlin with the Steelers. Steelers fans were going to fire him if the Steelers lost that game. You do realize that game was essentially who's going to get fired. And who says Mike Tomlin's even still safe? He could get fired if they get destroyed in the first round. If Rodgers doesn't want to come back, they say, okay, you know what? This is the best time to pull the plug. We just lost our quarterback and our coach. We're going to reset this thing. And Pete Carroll, obviously, on the Raiders isn't really the same type of example, but you know what it honestly reminds me of? It's like the Raiders were a bad team. The Giants are not a good team. So when you get one of these old coaches onto these teams, when have we exactly seen that, work? I'm sure there are examples. It's not nearly as apparent as what we're seeing in today's NFL. When we have these other coaching trees starting to spawn the coaches into the NFL, in particular, the Rams, Dave Canales, Liam Cohen, Mike LaFleur is their current offensive coordinator, and they've got branches all over the place, and that's even from Kyle Shanahan, his tree. We've seen guys like Raheem Morris get a job and get fired by the Falcons. They haven't all worked out, but to be honest, I would argue the GM and whoever made the final call on signing Kirk Cousins was probably the most, to blame there, because clearly there was something that they were unaware of, that they kind of backpedaled on and drafted Penix for. How are you supposed to really run a functional team with that kind of stuff going on? I felt like the defense was playing fairly well considering their lack of talent. But regardless, he also was not perfect when it came to the critical situations, the clock management and all that. And this is not about Raheem Morris. This is about the fact that this coaching tree of his, and him as a head coach himself, he is kind of expiring. Mike Macdonald was a great defensive coordinator. And you know what happened to him? Because John Harbaugh is a CEO, and you have a defensive and offensive coordinator that are the ones, calling the plays. It's not like Sean McVay where he could be kind of taking over the offense. You don't really know too much about who's calling the plays. Rams fans, if you have more information about that, please drop it in the comments. But it's just that guy is going to get poached by another franchise that's looking for a head coach, because you basically cannot hold on to that guy as if, he's locking you down. With a guy like Tomlin, he's locking down the defense. If you lose your defensive coordinator, you're not really worried because Tomlin's going to lock it down. If you lose your offensive coordinator and you're the Rams, you really don't care because you still have Sean McVay, right? But with John Harbaugh, if you get a Mike Macdonald coordinator in there and, you get a top 5 defense in year 2 or year 3, if you even get to year 3, he's gone the next year. And now you're resetting constantly at offensive and defensive coordinator, and you're not going to be guaranteed to hold on to anything. And I don't want this young Giants team that's going to be growing and developing to have coordinators that are getting ripped away constantly. I would really like whatever comes next to stay. So if we do actually find success, I think our immediate downfall that will come from, after that is going to be us losing defensive or offensive coordinator, and then that side of the ball regressing going into the following year. Some poor clock management stuff from, John Harbaugh himself, and then, maybe some, holes on the roster that are still going to be there because it's presumed that Joe Schoen is still going to be the GM. That's another factor that I have completely failed to mention thus far, and is Joe Schoen just trying to keep his job safe by doing this? Because it's immediately clear to me that there's a lot of people who are a big fan of this idea of hiring John Harbaugh. And like I said, I laid out in the beginning, I understand why that is. But ultimately, it's just like, is this trying to keep Joe Schoen in-house? Is that really what we want? Because Bobby Skinner did a great job of Giants Nation show explaining the criteria and, the sample of coaches we have in Joe Schoen's shoes who have won like 30 or 40 games, or not even, no, 20 to 30 games, somewhere in that range across 4 years. And what happened to them? Most of them were fired. Pretty much all of them were fired. But of the ones that were retained, most of them were fired in the next year or two. And the ones who did remain, it was the Buccaneers GM, who managed to sign Tom Brady, of course, and then go on to win the Super Bowl. And now we see what's left over. It's been pretty solid. And then the Rams, who were able to hire Sean McVay. And now, one would assume, obviously, the GM is kind of, calling the shots, but I would kind of think Sean McVay is the leader in that building. And I just, like I said, I do not like the idea of Joe Schoen staying. I've mentioned how this head coaching search could provide, a solution in the head coach wanting a GM of himself. So you're not really doing a GM search. You're kind of letting the head coach do the work for you, which, not going to lie, goes along with the idea that Giants ownership isn't really in a great spot to make any drastic changes right now. It's like, well, then let's just hire the coach and let him pick the GM if we really trust the coach that much. I think it goes along with that narrative, I would say. And I want to really make sure we don't do anything rash and hire someone soon, because we got to see all these candidates throughout the playoffs. All these playoff teams, they're going to have the best coaches. Coaches, they win playoff games, and guys on teams like this Seattle team that have, completely surprised so many NFL fans is a team where we should be looking at their coaches. There are other coaches who have been fired that people have also talked about. It's not just John Harbaugh. It's like Kevin Stefanski, Jonathan Gannon. I think people or the Giants could think about, and then maybe Raheem Morris. I think Tomlin falls into the same category because, like I said, I'm not sure the Steelers are going to hold on to him. And I know he's still under contract, but I don't know how expensive it would be to trade for him. But it's like Kevin Stefanski. Oh, 1 second. Let me get this audio off. It's really the guys in the playoffs that you should be interested in. And of them, my favorite is Clint Kubiak, the Seahawks offensive coordinator. And there's an article that I'll show you guys in a second, but just on the surface, what they've been able to do this year and how they prepared for this season, drafting a guard, that was huge. They had the courage to trade away DK Metcalf and trust JSN with Sam Darnold to be a quarterback wide receiver duo with, somewhat questionable depth behind it. Cooper Kupp, but that panned out really well with his ability to help JSN. Torrey Horton is a rookie, and then they traded for Rashid Shaheed. But ultimately, it was you were confident in JSN, and that was really it. But now they have an elite quarterback wide receiver connection on the season. Imagine that with Jackson Dart and Malik Neighbors. The running back duo they have, the shifty Kenneth Walker, and then you have the bruising Zach Charbonnet, and you can kind of just use them both whenever. And I think that's totally how Tracy and Scatterboot can be used. And then imagine throwing a guard in front of that. Maybe he could bring a friend to help coach the defense. Maybe even a GM, so that we can move on from Joe Schoen and have a completely new vision, right? I'd love to poach as much from the Seahawks general management and coaching staff as I possibly can. I think it's pretty clear. It looks like they at least have the best coaching staff in the NFL right now. It's like that red hot. with how much they've been able to do relative to the talent they have on offense. I think Clint Kubiak deserves a lot of credit. I do think Sam Darnold obviously deserves credit too, and so does JSN and all the other Seahawks players. But there was a reason all of us were going into this season not projecting this because it wasn't proven, right? But Clint Kubiak has proved this before. We saw him with the Saints, and what he was able to do early on in the season before they were tattered with injuries was pretty amazing. 40 points in the first 2 weeks of the season, schedule or not, that's an impressive level of preparation to start the season, and that's something the Giants have severely lacked. And the Seahawks offense did not start off great versus the 49ers, but they picked up every week after that, and they've been effective except for that first Rams game, and they've already redeemed that. So they grow throughout the season too. I want a piece of that. And so here's just the article that I wanted to bring to your guys' attention. This came out today, also with John Harbaugh's kind of news. And it was that the Giants, the Raiders, and the Cardinals all requested an interview with Clint Kubiak. And now, not for nothing, I'm not going to lie, I've been asking for this for a while, so I'm excited, and I'm going to read this short little article. Seahawks offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak is drawing a lot of interest from teams looking for head coaches. Albert Breer from SportsIllustrated.com reports that the Giants, Cardinals, and Raiders have requested interviews with Kubiak. The Falcons previously put in their request. Kubiak joined Mike Macdonald's staff in Seattle for the 2025 season and helped the Seahawks finish third in the league in points scored. Kubiak was the offensive coordinator in New Orleans in 2024 and has worked wonders for the 49ers, Broncos, and Vikings earlier in his career. Kubiak is available for virtual interviews this week because the Seahawks have a bye week. As the top seed in the NFC playoffs, Breer adds that he is working out how the best balance interviews with preparation for the Seahawks' first postseason game. Well, first of all, that always gets messy. Don't forget Jonathan Gannon and all the heat he's gotten from the Eagles for not only his performance in the Super Bowl that many attribute to a possible lack of focus, but just kind of everything that occurred around that situation. It just feels weird. Go win the Super Bowl, dude. Interview after. I know that the other teams are in a different spot and they want to move now. They don't want to have to wait. So I understand the big picture, but you get what I'm saying. It's just kind of unfortunate that these guys are forced into this situation. But hey, they're going to be grateful when they're getting paid millions and millions of dollars to be the head coach of an NFL team. But yeah, Clint Kubiak is my favorite guy. And it's because he does seem like, looking at the exposure he's had, 49ers, Broncos, Vikings, seeing what he's done with this Seahawks team and the Saints last year. And it just looks to me like on the field, like they play so fast, they are so well prepared. And I'm thinking Sam Darnold, if that's the way he looks with Clint Kubiak, with a team that went into the year with offensive line questions, one wide receiver and a running back duo, I'm like, that's literally the Giants. Draft us a guard, except we have Andrew Thomas. I know they have Charles Cross, but I think Andrew Thomas is better. And it's just like we have that foundation for offense. That's the kind of stuff the Giants were good at this year, was actually being physical. I think we could get some better tight ends, to be honest. Theo was pretty decent, but it's like I think we have the personnel to run his offense. So he's definitely my front runner favorite. That's how I feel. And it's so much better, in my opinion, than getting a guy like John Harbaugh. How long are fans going to be patient with Harbaugh if it doesn't work right away? Compared to Clint Kubiak. If it doesn't work right away with Clint Kubiak, I think, fans will be patient. They'll say, okay, he's kind of got to figure out like the first couple weeks or whatever. If the Giants don't figure it out right away with John Harbaugh, they're going to freak out because they're thinking, oh, we already have the defensive talent that, the Ravens did or did not have. Oh, the Giants offense, it's got weapons and stuff, but, we address the offensive line. I don't know. I don't think the way he would handle it would be the same way as Clint Kubiak, or the way the fans would react would be the same as they would to Clint Kubiak. I think they would expect immediate results is the meat of what I'm trying to say here. And I think the Giants, it's just like top to bottom. They just got to restart. We can't have, the fan base. It's been 4 years of Joe Schoen, 6 years of Daniel Jones, the end of Eli's career. Like, guys, can we just give it a break here and just restart and bite the bullet, and not hire like a bridge coach who we know has probably already hit his ceiling, and keep our GM who we're just kind of hoping figures it out and is in like a bottom of the barrel demographic of production, and we're just giving him a chance because we're hoping he can sign the next Sean McVay, or maybe Patrick Mahomes will become available sometimes. Like, why we're keeping him, it really by the numbers really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think just having a brand new start, Dart and the next regime, I think sounds great to me. And I think Clint Kubiak should be the guy to handle that. There are going to be some other guys, but it's just the example I want to bring up when people are going to talk about Harbaugh. I was kind of bigger on Tomlin earlier. I like Tomlin more than Harbaugh because he's never had Lamar, and they, although have not gone as far in the playoffs recently, they were. Even late in Ben's career, they were getting to the playoffs. I think they've had terrible quarterback play, and they've still been getting there. And I know my defensive coordinator isn't going to get poached. Even though my offensive coordinator will get poached, my defensive coordinating and cohesiveness will not get poached over the years, and just constantly reset. So I like him more than Harbaugh, but it's the same idea where I'm pretty sure Tomlin's best years are probably behind him, although I think he has got to be younger than John Harbaugh. Let me just double check real quick. How old is Mike Tomlin? 53. Yeah, so he's got 10 more years, and that's another reason. I had a feeling he was younger. I just wasn't sure exactly how many years. And so I like him more than Harbaugh. You do have to kind of trade for him, though, unless if they fire him. And I'm not a huge fan of that idea. But these young guys, Clint Kubiak, I think could be the next Liam Cohen. I think he could be the next Dave Canales. Both of these teams in the playoffs, taking teams like the Jaguars and the Panthers that have, they've had some bright spots, but, since Cam, the Panthers really have been terrible. And the Jaguars, they had 1 year where they made the playoffs, and every other year has just been like stumbling mid or stumbling bad. And now with Liam Cohen, I get that the Chiefs are out of here, but when the Chiefs were all together this year, the Jaguars beat them. And Trevor Lawrence has got every bit of talent that, Drake May has. It's not like this team has got nothing to work with, but neither do the Giants. We got Jackson Dart. We got talent on defense. We got some weapons on offense now. It's an okay offensive line when it's healthy, but the coaching has been really bad. And I just think it's a spot where one of these young, coaches who could be the head coach to own this team for the next 18 years, like John Harbaugh did, and maybe earn a Super Bowl. I think you got to shoot for that when you have a young quarterback like this. You can't be shooting for, let's get a bridge guy who's got, like all this history with all these other teams. Like, no. Let's get Jackson Dart and this Giants team like a fresh start and a fresh identity, I think is really what we need, because Dart is giving us an opportunity to have a new identity as we could bring in a new regime, right? And it'll follow through with the Dart stuff. But if we retain Joe Schoen for another 2 years even, Jackson Dart will always kind of have his identity associated with Joe Schoen and his failures. And I think that's just not what's best for the future. So ultimately, I don't think we should hire John Harbaugh. I think we should see the coaching process all the way through and hope that one of those head coaches wants a different GM. I think that's kind of it for my overall planned rant. I whipped this up really fast for you guys. But I really just wanted to get my thoughts out there. And I guess I just want to double down a little bit on how much the Ravens fans that I've heard every Sunday, the things that they've said reign true in the games that I've seen this season. And, looking back and thinking back to, all the decisions and, critical moments that have, cost the Ravens a chance, to reach their potential as a team. That's coaching, that's coaching. And if we get John Harbaugh and he's good enough and he keeps himself and Joe Schoen here and we become like this, whether it's 7-10 to to a 10-7 team. Or we're just like the Steelers and we're like always 9-8, or we're going to be like the Ravens and we'll miss the playoffs and we'll have like an okay kind of bad year, like 8 wins, 9 wins if Jackson Dart gets hurt, and when he doesn't get hurt, we will make the playoffs, but we will lose it in the most unbelievable and like shocking, jarring fashion that did not look at all like what you saw in the regular season. I really cannot have that. Like, I will take something new and learn what the disappointment ends up being, right? Because there's promise of growth. I don't see that promise with John Harbaugh. Although, like I said, it's not impossible. I do think this Giants situation is pretty good, but that doesn't mean we can't acknowledge that I think it's more unlikely than Clint Kubiak working out and being able to hit that higher ceiling more consistently for longer. Because if they both work, I would still rather have Kubiak because I get him for longer. So that's kind of the essence of my opinion on the matter here. And I'm just glad I could hop on and share my thoughts with you guys about this, because it is a huge moment for the Giants. We had Brian Dabol for 4 years. This could be a a 4-year journey that we're heading into here with whoever this is we hire. It could be 2 years. It could be hopefully much longer than 4 years if it's someone who works out, right? Because we don't want to be stuck with the wrong guy for too many years. Not that again, right? Although I don't think Brian Dabol is that terrible, but. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you joining me for this spontaneous live stream. Forgive me for a bit of a lack of rhythm here and there. I did throw this together really fast, and I just wanted to get it out there because I think it's important that people are sharing the different views on this kind of stuff. So thank you all again. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this one. You can subscribe to The Pocket, and you can follow along with me for Giants content. I also have the Illegal Formation podcast on this channel right now. Soon it's going to get its own. And that's where I'm joined by Dan and Joey, and we discuss the NFL season. We'll be predicting the playoffs later this week, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Hit that subscribe button. And share your thoughts in the comments, most importantly. Please, I want to know what other people think about this because I see a lot of support for this. He is the favorite, and I just don't get it. So please, let me know. All right? That's going to be all for